Good evening, Judah. Tonight we have a special story for you, The Tale of Peter Rabbit. This was an old story that I grew up with, and maybe we read it to your mama too. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said the old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go to the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put into a pie by Mrs. McGregor." What do you suppose that means? "Now run along and don't get into any mischief, because I must go out." So there she is. She took her basket and her umbrella and went down the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little rabbits, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, there's Peter, was a very naughty rabbit, and he ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First he ate some lettuce and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. And then, feeling rather sick because of all the stuff he'd eaten, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up right away and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened, and he rushed all over the garden, for he'd forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages, and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs instead of 2, and went faster, so that I think he might have gotten away if he had not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. See how he's caught and he's upside down? It was a blue jacket with brass buttons and quite new. Peter gave himself up for loss and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows. Some little birds have come to see him, who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve. Is a sieve here? Which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind. So there he is now, no clothes at all, no shoes, but he escaped. And he rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a watering can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it hadn't had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot or something. He began to turn them over carefully, each one looking carefully to see if he could find Peter. Presently, Peter sneezed, and Mr. McGregor was after him in no time. Mr. McGregor tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. He gave up for the time being. He thought that blasted rabbit had gotten away. Peter was around the corner, and he sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp from having been in that watering can. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity, lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. Can you go lippity-lippity? He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. But an old mouse was running in and out of the same door, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not even answer him. She just shook her head, and Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat, a kitty cat, was staring at some goldfish there. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched back, showing that she was really alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her, though. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. You'll hear about Benjamin Bunny in another story later. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Scratch, 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 scritch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes, but presently, as nothing happened there, he came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. There he is, looking over the wheelbarrow. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor, hoeing onions now. His back was turned toward Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could along the straight walk behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him then at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up Peter's little jacket and shoes to make a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Look at this. There they are. Peter never stopped running or looking behind him till he got home and was under the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. He had come back completely naked, that rabbit. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. Now, what's a fortnight? Fortnight is an old word because this is an English story, and it means 2 weeks or 14 nights. I'm sorry to say that Peter was not very well that evening. He was sick. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoon to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end.